I always forget that I'm on like a 15-second delay. So whatever I say, I'm just talking to myself for those first 15 seconds after I say it. But am I good? Can you hear me? Can everyone? Well, I keep moving to this side so you can't see me on the camera. So I need to like sit statically here. Yo. What is up, everybody? I have to stay here so everyone can see my face. Okay, someone can hear me. Yes, thank you. Getting some feedback. Loud and clear. Hopefully it's not too loud. You can do like an ASMR stream with this mic, but that's not the channel for this. So, today we are going to be running through the application security component, which, if you don't know, you can use it as a web application firewall, a WAF. So everyone's been around and they know what a WAF is. It's obviously something to protect your applications. So obviously application security component, it's kind of like the new terminology. So that's what we've decided to call it. However, it's tried to be clear that it is a WAF. It's intended to be used as a WAF. So if you head over to the YouTube chat, so I'm gonna do my streamer like it's reversed, so it's this side. So over there on the chat, if you've got it hidden, unhide it and say hello. If not, just open it, and at the very top you should be able to see a ping comment from CrowdSec, and it should look like a domain of Killer. This is a workshop that you can load, so I'll just show you quickly here. So it should look like this. It shouldn't say become a plus member because this is the one that's timed out, but I will refresh the page in due course. But this is the workshop that we're going to be running through. So I'll refresh it now. Hopefully I don't get anything 10 times out, but you will have to create an account on Killer. You could just use one of the social logins like GitHub, Google, anything. But once you've got an account, you should be able to see a page like this, which is one side is the terminal that we've got access to, which is basically a Docker environment. And on the left-hand side is all of this work that all this text I've been typing up over the last couple of days. Give me 1 second. Let me just put my notifications on the mute. Okay. So, CrowdSec application security component. You may see the application security component referred to by us as well as in this workshop as AppSec. AppSec is just the easier terminology than reeling off all the words of it. And in this workshop, I'm going to show you how you can set up the application security component itself, and how we can connect it to the web server that we have running on this box, which is Nginx. Currently, at the moment, we are still in the preview phase of the AppSec component, and Nginx is the only web server that is currently supported. However, we are working with partners and people to make sure that other web servers are supported in due course. So yeah, we will just read like what is an applications AppSec component. So it's a component that you can use to protect your web servers. It allows the web server to send the request that the user is sending to the web server to the component, and it will do a bunch of rule checks on the request. And if there's an issue, like it hits one of your rules, it will then send the web server whatever your configured remediation is for said rules. Don't get alarmed that this is all going over your head if you've only just joined or anything like that. This workshop is designed to be step by step, and it breaks everything down into nice, neat modules. Is everybody okay with that? And if you are just joining, because I can see that the view count's going up, there is a pinned message on one of the sides of the thing where the chat messages, and it's the Killer Coder Workshop. You can go into there and you'll be in the same page that we are now. So let's move forward. So the first thing that we're going to have to do, because the AppSec component is still in the preview phase, so just to give you some more context, we have decided that version 156 is not going to be the release name of the version. We're going to call it version 1.60. However, just for the preview, we are just going to be calling it 156 for now. So to do this, we're going to have to run this command here in the middle where it says this gives us access to the preview repositories. The way that Killer Coder works is that if you hover above the command, it will say the word exec underneath it. If you click that command, it will then run it in the terminal to the right hand side. I am just going to increase my font size just so it's a little bit more easier on the screen, but you'll see the same thing if you're clicking on the same commands as me on your screen as well. So what this does is it sets up the preview repositories. If you are already running CrowdSec in production or in some sort of place, and you already have our packages installed, you can still download the preview repositories and it will allow you to run the preview versions of CrowdSec. And let's say if you have an issue with the preview version, you can easily just roll back to the other version. Okay, now since we've got the preview repositories installed, it's the same thing that you would run when you first install CrowdSec, which is apt install CrowdSec. So whilst this is running, I just want to clarify one thing, that even though the application security is called a component, it still lives within the CrowdSec security engine itself. Okay, great. So now we've installed the preview version. So if we run CSCLI version, you'll see that we have version 156 and then RC and then a number. So the RC just means like a release candidate. So it just means it's just a preview version. It's just something that's not released to the public yet via the normal packages. Now so we're going to jump right in, and the first thing that we're going to set up is the acquisition. So you may be familiar with acquisitions that you have before. One second. So within you may set up normal acquisitions such as like the file acquisition to read from a file. You may set up a Docker acquisition which reads from the Docker socket. And now we have a new one called AppSec, which creates the application security port. So I'm just going to show you a quick diagram on how this all fits together. So heading over to the documentation, if you're on the next branch, you should now see that CrowdSec is now a drop-down menu. And within this drop-down menu is the application security component. Clicking on this, if we scroll down just a little bit more, you should see this incredible diagram. It's meant to be basic so you can get the general gist of how it works. So the incoming HTTP request hits the web server layer. What the web server then decides to do is send the forwarded request to the CrowdSec security engine on a TCP port at the moment. What it would then do is evaluate the request, and then if the inbound rules trigger, which will be described later, then it will send a interrupt or it's called like not interruption but disruption to the web server to say, hey, you shouldn't process this request anymore. You should just drop it and do whatever you've been configured to do to drop the request. So that's just so this next bit makes easier to understand. So in this step, we're going to set up the AppSec component. And at the moment, it listens on a TCP socket. So you have to define which address it listens on, as well as which port. So in this example, we're going to use port 4242 because that's the answer to life. And we're going to put it on the loopback interface. However, please make note of this warning. Because it is a TCP server, a HTTP server, please make sure that you don't accidentally expose it to the internet. There is authentication on the endpoint, so it's not just a plain thing that's listening there. However, it's always best to practice minimizing your surface area, so just make sure that you don't accidentally expose it when you don't mean to. So here is an example of the configuration file. So I won't talk about it just yet. I'll just go through all of the keys one by one. So with the source is called AppSec. This is a mandatory value that needs to be placed there if you want it to become an application security component. It's quite clear. Next thing is the AppSec config. So this is the data file that will tell the application security component what rules to load. We will be going through this later on in the workshop about what it is. But at the moment, we are going to use the official CrowdSecurity virtual patching configuration that comes from the hub. The listen address is the address where you would like it to listen. So as I stated before, we're going to listen on 127.0.0.1 loopback on port 4242. And then the labels. So if you've ever done like file acquisition or any other sort of acquisition at all, you know that you have to define a type. So this type is AppSec, that one there. And then the name property that you saw is optional. So if you have multiple application security components that you want to run within CrowdSec, you may want to give it a name, because when you're looking at the logs of CrowdSec logs, the name component will be logged with the rules that are matched. So it's just easier to know where the rule came from. Okay, so we're just going to click on this big box at the bottom, and it will run a command in the terminal to create the directory for the acquisitions called acquisition.d, and it will also drop a file in there called appsec.yaml with the contents that we've just gone through. Right here. Okay, so heading on to the next section, because we're going to use the official CrowdSecurity virtual patching configuration or / rules, we need to reach out to the hub and download that collection. So on this line, you can just click on this cscli command, and it will run and download all those configuration. And I missed it at the start, but just to define what the virtual patching collection is it's just a collection which contains common exploited vulnerabilities. And we will be testing the WAF or the AppSec component in due course, just to make sure that those rules do match what we expect. Okay, so after running those first, the command about the acquisition and running the cscli command, that's pretty much it for CrowdSec. There's not much else that we need to do other than restart it. So you can run this sudo systemctl restart command, and if we just give it a second, it will, once the terminal comes back up, that is the component is now running in the background. And we can ensure that it is running, that if we run this netcat command, so nc and then zv on the port, you should get a output that says connection to the port has succeeded. So that's it. So we've now got a application security component that has got the virtual patching rules in it. However, next we will have to install and configure Nginx to be able to forward those requests to the component. So hitting next, you'll go into the page where it asks you to install the bouncer. So we can then click on the top line where it says apt install bouncer and click that, and that will now run through. And when the bouncer installs, it will automatically generate a API key, as you can see here, and it will put it into the bouncer configuration, and it will automatically configure all of the stuff for the general remediation component of the Nginx. E.g., if the IP is banned, then don't let it through. However, we want to now enable the application security forwarding inside Nginx Lua. So we need to echo this line here. So echo AppSec equals the address into the configuration file. Once you have run that, if you run the next command called nginx-t, which is asking Nginx to test the configuration, you should be able to see that you'll get a line. It does say Nginx error. It's kind of weird the way that Nginx Lua works, is that they have concept of like info debug and everything, but by default it only logs errors. So you should see here that init AppSec is enabled on, and then the port that we've defined. Okay, just those lines inside Nginx. That is it. That is the configuration done. So the next line after the Nginx-t, you should be able to see one that says Nginx-s reload. And now that will tell Nginx to say, hey, we've changed the configuration. You need to go and re-pull all this stuff and configure it correctly. And that is it. In those 5 commands, we've now downloaded the vpatch collection for CrowdSec. We've told a AppSec component to use said configuration, and now we've configured Nginx bouncer to set forward the request to CrowdSec. So in this kill request, this is a Laravel debug vulnerability, and the reason that I chose this vulnerability is that it's reliant on the post data. And if you've been with CrowdSec for some time, you know that we don't have access to post data because we were only reading the logs. We were never actually intercepting the request and seeing what data was actually inside the body. So if you run this request, you should now see that you get the response code of 403 forbidden. And that's because we've now hit we hit one of the rules within AppSec, and it's now responded with the 403. We can ensure that this, let's see, running here. So once, and you can ensure that this is actually what is happening, because if you run CSCLI alerts list, you should be able to see that this IP address did Laravel debug mode vulnerability. And obviously, because we're only running things locally, you can see here that it's a local IP address. So I'll just clear my terminal there. Okay. That's not everything. Well, I'm just waiting for the chat to catch up to where I am. I'm just going to take a sip of my drink. Awesome. Okay, so obviously at the moment, because we're CrowdSec and we like to make things extremely easy for you, if you just want to do the vpatch collection and live with the Nginx bouncer the way that it is, that's all you need to do. However, for those people who like to tinker and make sure the things that are optimal, or just like to learn the way that it works, is we're going to dive into how the AppSec component knows where stuff is, knows how to load the rules, and actually knows how to interpret the rules that you write. So before diving into the actual rule itself, we need to understand there's two directories that get made when you do CSELI collections install the vpatch collection. So if you run the ls-rla, you'll see that there's two directories. One that's called configuration, and then one that's called rules. The configs directory is where the configuration for the application security component actually lives. And in this one, this is how it knows which rules to load, because in that configuration, it lists out the rules, but I will go through that in the next slide, just because we're going to go through the rule section in this one. So the rules directory is where the actual rules live. So these are just YAML files that have a certain structure. We'll go through the YAML file in detail in the next bit. So scrolling down here, you should now see, let's take a look at the Laravel debug rule. So I'm going to walk through all this stuff one by one, but basically the name of it itself is called obviously Crowd Security vpatch rule. If you've ever worked with parsers, scenarios and collections, you know that this is the way that we typically name stuff, is the author and then what it does. Yep. The next section is a description. This description will be shown on the hub. Yep. I will just show you one thing really quick. I'm guessing it's out of general stuff, but if not, it doesn't matter, whatever. Okay, so if I go into hub.crowdsec.net, you will be able to see that on the hub, we now have these two new buttons. We have AppSec configurations and AppSec rules, and they are exactly the same as the ones that you saw here. So we'll look at it in a second, but you can see here that this description will be what is shown on the rules here. So if I type Laravel, you'll see here the text box thing. This is the thing that's shown on the hub if you want to contribute your rule back. So the rules section that you see in the middle, this is the start of where the rule gets to be defined. Yep. So the first line is the modifier for the rule. So if you've never worked with seclang before, there's a way for you to chain rules. So you have to say if rule A, rule B, and rule C all trigger at the same time, then it's this vulnerability. So at the moment, the default is OR. So in most cases, you want AND, so we will be changing that default configuration. So yes, so if we look at this example, and because the modifier is AND, it would mean that these two rules here that start with the hyphen on the zones, both of these rules need to match for this rule to trigger. The next section that we go through are the zones. So the way that seclang does stuff is very confusing because it's been around for a very long time, and there's been a lot of things that have been added to the zones. So what we have done is we have created a human readable different format of those. So if you click on the here button, it will go to our documentation and it will tell you basically what the zone is, the string that you can provide, and what it actually gives you at the end. You can also go to Karaza.io and look through I think it's the variable stuff here. But as you can see, like, there's hundreds and hundreds of stuff because seclang has been around for a long, long time. There's a lot of things here that you probably won't use. So we've basically taken the liberty of making a human readable format of it. And so that's the zone. So on this example, we're matching on the method string, which is basically When you make a get request, a post request, a put request, that is the string of what method would be. It will be those get, post, and put in those examples. The next section is the matcher. So the matcher that we define here is an equals. So this is a strict equals. So if it equals post in capital letters, then it's correct. So as always with HTTP, all methods are in uppercase. So this rule will match if the method is a post request. So when you go back to the rule that ran, providing this -- data, curl automatically knows that post requests are the default, so it will automatically send a post. So if we have a look here, you can see post / HTTP / 1.1, for example. And then I don't go through the next rule because I think it's self-explanatory. What happens here is that we look through the body arg names. So then what we can do is go to our documentation, go and read what body arg names does, and it's just the name of the body arguments. So when you send a request to a server, if you've never worked with URL encoded forms before, the way that it works is that you have key and then equals and then a value. So when you get body arg names, you're getting the first part of the something equals part. So if I were to send a request like this, so and then foo equals bar, you would get in body arg names, you would get 0x and then the brackets, and then you get foo, because they are the two argument names that are passed inside the body. Cool. Let's clear the screen. So if it isn't apparent, when you define the rules like this in a YAML file, behind the scenes, when you're loading CrowdSec, it interprets the rules and generates the seclang compatible string on the back end. So if you want to see what those rules actually look like under the hood, because most people don't like writing seclang rules, and if you do, then that's great, but they are very complicated. So if you run CSCLI AppSec rules inspect with that name, you'll see down here, this is the automatic generated seclang rules. Maybe I should have also described what seclang actually is. So when Mod Security was defining the rules-based WAF, they decided that this was going to be the rule format. So this is the reason that we still support sec rules, because core rule set, which is like the biggest rule set out there, is written with this sec rules approach. But here you go. So you can see like these are the two rules that get added, and you can see that if the method request equals post, then we chain it, and then we chain to this rule, which would then say if the post arg names equals this. Cool. Let's go to the next page. So we've defined what an acquisition is. I've shown you what the Laravel debug rule looks like, but how do those two things intertwined? Like, how does it know that it needs to load this Laravel debug rule? Well, it's the application security component configuration that you define. So at the start, when we generated the acquisition YAML, I already put in there the crowd security virtual patching rules, and this rule exists when you download it from the hub. So this is what the rule file looks like. So it has a name, default stuff and stuff like that. So the name is the same name of what you define within the actual acquisition. So we define virtual patching, so we define virtual patching within the name property. And I'll go through the default remediation. So Depending on how you want to handle the request, there may be different ways you want to handle things. So the way to look at it is default remediation will be the remediation that happens once an inbound rule has been triggered. I will go through what inbound versus out of bound is in a second, but I've realized it's gone really dark in here, so I'll turn on the light. Oh. So the default remediation is only for inbound rules. So when this rule gets triggered, the reason that we do ban capture log is because in a ban template, if you've ever used the Nginx remediation component, it will serve up the ban template you've seen before. You have been blocked by CrowdSec, blah blah blah, or you can have capture, so you can load the same capture page that you've already know and love, and it will just handle it that way. And then log is a different thing. It will just basically log that this would have been blocked if you only want to deploy it in like what do they call it in Seclang, like just monitoring mode only. However, there's one thing that I want to make extremely clear, that when you define the remediation to be ban, it does not ban the IP address that has done the request. It only blocks the current request that is being sent. However, there is a default scenario that comes with the application, the virtual patching rules. So if I'm smart enough, I can find it. I think it's called vpatch something. Is it called vpatch something? Yes, AppSec vpatch. I can see it there. Okay, there is a default scenario that comes with the vpatch collection that basically says if somebody sends 2 requests that trigger the AppSec blocking, then ban the IP address. However, this is all taken in account of your current configuration. So if you have whitelists or anything like that, then yes, that will all be taken into account. Okay. And then the next section is about inbound rules. So in the virtual patching configuration, there's only inbound rules. And the way that they define it is we do crowd security, vpatch, and then a star. So we support globbing with this. So anything that starts with crowd security / vpatch -star will be automatically imported into this rule set. So when we do updates and bring out new CVE scenarios, your application security component will automatically pull those in when they are downloaded. However, this is not an extensive list of all the configurations that you can give. So I have put a link in this section to say you can go and read it on the documentation. However, I want to clarify the inbound versus out-of-bound rules. So within the AppSec component, there is this concept of inbound and out-of-bound. The way to look at it is that inbound rules are disruptive. So if your rule fits, if it matches any of your inbound rules, then the web server will be informed to do something disruptive, or log, as you saw with the default remediation. However, out-of-bound rules are not disruptive. So you may have a rule which takes a long time to process, like check if the file contents of this 100 megabyte file contains PHP code somewhere. That's going to take a long time to process. So you may want to shift that onto your out-of-bound rule set so you get a warning about that, but it won't actually block the current request. And just to make it extremely clear that within the codebase, out-of-band rules can never become disruptive because the way that the channels work. So when the inbound rules have been fully computed, the web server has already been informed about what decision to take. Okay, So that's enough of me rambling on. We can now create our own rule. So I'm going to take another sip of my drink. So give me 1 second. Awesome. So we're going to create our own rule. And just because it's very easy to, if you ever self-host things on the internet, you'll get this all the time. Okay, we keep seeing bots that are requesting wplogin.php. However, we don't actually host WordPress. So we know those people that are just asking for that file are probably just bots that are just scanning the internet. So let's just create a rule that will stop them from doing that. Because it's no skin off my nose that they don't get the file, because my server will just respond with a 404 anyways. So we're going to click this area to create the rule. So if you want to digest it further, obviously we go to the AppSec rules and we create a file called myrule.yaml. Cool. And just to break it down a little bit further, we can see here that the zones is the URI, which if we go back to the documentation, this is the URI of the core request. So like the unique resource identifier. If anyone knows it, we put a transform of lowercase on it. So if anyone does like get /wp -login, you know, some weird ass like formatting on it, it will still be catched by the rule. And if it contains the word wp-login.php, it will be blocked. Okay, and for the next section, I couldn't automate it really, so I just get you to open it in the text editor. So there's a file called virtualpatching.yaml within the AppSec configs, and I need you to add this line just directly below where the vpatch rules are. So I'm going to walk through it on this machine. So I'm a Vim boy at heart, so I'm going to use Vim, and I'm going to open that file. If you wanted to know, if you hover above where this open this file is, you can click it and it will copy it to your clipboard. Just a little cheat. So open it in Vim, and then I'm going to go down to the inbound rules section, and I'm going to press O to go down to a new line, and I am inserting the rule here. So if I go across here, I then want to create a hyphen, and then I'm going to create an open quote. I'm going to do my / and then a star and then a close quote. Okay, and then once you've done that, if you've opened Vim and you've never closed a file in Vim before, good luck. Now I'm only joking. Hit escape, then type semicolon, and then type WQ if you're in Vim, and that will write and quit at the same time. So so it's abundantly clear how those two things interact. If we scroll up, you'll see here that the name of the rule is called my/rule. And if I scroll down to the import statement that we've just added, it's my/star. So anything that starts with my/ will be imported into the AppSec component. So once that's done, we can just reload CrowdSec by doing systemctl restart CrowdSec, and that will then trigger all the rules to be rewritten, reread, and properly put into place. So now we can just test our rule. Just send a curl request asking for wplogin.php, and we get the same response, 403 forbidden. So even if we try to do something funky with wp- and then we do login like this, you'll see that it still is forbidden because it's run the lowercase transformer, and it's still matched no matter how they try to do it. That is the whole getting started with the AppSec component. So I would like to get your feedbacks. If you got any questions, shoot them away in the chat. But yeah, I'm just gonna take another drink, so I'll wait for your feedback. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Everfly. I just realized as well when I was looking at the end of the workshop, I didn't change the last card. Whoops. I'll change that afterwards. But you can go through this workshop as many times as you like, just to get the feel of the AppSec component and obviously how it will work for you. Please read documentation, because we spend some time obviously creating the documentation for people to read it. Cheers. Thank you for the feedback. Life on Shuttle. Shuffle. Shuttle. Why Shuttle? Life on Shuffle. Thank you. So, the one question that I never covered, but I'll cover now anyways, is how to load modsec rules, or seclan rules as you really want to call it. Like raw seclan rules, because there's many things out there. So if you go into the configuration file and scroll down, no, it's not here. Yeah, it is. Is it? No, it's not. I'm talking absolute rubbish. You go to the create. Yes, Avifly. So currently we have Nginx and OpenResty. We've spoken to the guys at Linux Server, the Swag, because it's all based on the same Lua plugin. So they're planning to do a implementation like pretty much after it goes live. With Trafiq, we need to have a conversation with the guys who are doing the actual plugin itself, because they run it live in production. So we still need to weigh here, because they run the plugin at their job, and that's the whole reason why they created the plugin in the first place. So there may be a thing where we need to create a branch just for the technical implementation to make sure it's stable enough before they go full prod with it. And then the Caddy implementation, I still need to reach out to H Slatman to say, would you be interested in doing this? Just because it's very for the actual web servers itself, the implementation is quite easy, because all they need to do is forward the request and wait for the response. So yeah, they're the main ones for now that I have on the top of my brain. We do want to also support Apache, dare I say it, but the thing with Apache is that we need to write C code. So yeah, we always try and stay away from C code. But back to where I was. So under the create rules, if I scroll down all the way down to the bottom, scroll up. No, it's not even here either. I'm on the wrong page. I'm all over the shop. Okay. Just cut out the last 10 seconds. Okay. You're going to go down to AppSec rule syntax, and you're going to go to seclan support. So because our DSL obviously converts and creates it into a seclan compatible format, because if you don't know, we use Karaza under the hood. You can actually just give us pure seclan rules, and we'll just load them as well. So if you have things like core rule set that you've gone through and meticulously crafted that it works for you, then you can just load core rule set into CrowdSec and we'll do the same thing. So the way that it looks like is here. So if you see here, so do you know when in your DSL, if I go back to here before it goes, so you see here where you got rules, you can just omit that, and then you can just do whichever tab I'm on, this one. So you can just define seclan rules, which is the pure seclan rule itself, or you can just say my files over here, and you have to store it within the data directory of CrowdSec itself. But that's just to tap on to the end of the webinar, because we're pretty much wrapping up here. Are there any more questions? I will just for the CrowdSec VOD. That's not what I want to do. That. And we're going to start quick. Would you be able to use CTI actions within the YAML file, or do you have to? What do you mean by CTI actions? I'll create a poll while I'm waiting for you to come back to me. I'm going to create a poll called, will you use the new AppSec component? Yes or no? Yes. No. Okay, apparently starting a poll completely disables your thing. As in disable the rules. Yes, so if you use the disable rules stuff, yes. So I can go into it. So Karaza interprets the comp files in order. So let's say if you load a comp file at the end that says disable rule by ID or disable stuff, it will still do that. However, we have the concept of hooks that we've created. So hooks are at certain levels of the application. So you have unload, pre-eval, post-eval, and unmatch. So these are hooks that you can run certain code. So on the unload hook, we have basically created a way for you to, within the YAML files itself, write a hook that says remove this rule because it's always false positive. Or if you want to, on pre-eval, to say, hey, we've got a request coming in from jellyfin.mydomain.com, and this one rule is false positive with my Jellyfin domain. I just want to disable the rule just for that one domain, and you could just run the remove inbound rule by ID on that one request that's coming from that domain. If that's answered your question. Because if I go to Karaza, and then it's like control disable rule by ID, disable rule. Apparently it doesn't like it. It's an action, isn't it? Yeah, that's cool. Disable. Yeah, this one. Remove rule by ID. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, anything that Karaza currently supports, which is like 89% of the directives, because there's still like things that haven't been implemented. Can I disable by target ID? Disable this ID for args username only. Not really, because you don't. Oh, okay. I get what you're asking here. You're basically saying that if, let's say, you receive an argument that says root, you want to disable this for the root user. Nah, it still adheres to the limitations of seclang. So, if we wanted to do that, we would have to pass. We would have to rewrite what Karaz is already doing to be able to support that, if you get what I mean. Because like we would have to get the post body, interpret it in some way to be able to know that that's there. Like I said, if you can do it in seclang, then yeah, you can do it in CrowdSec, but not within our DSL. Our DSL is meant to be like a friendly layer between like a way to come in to the system. But I'll speak about more probably in an advanced course that I'll be working on for the mod security stuff, because time is up, I'm afraid. Let's have a look at the poll. So pretty much it's all round yeses. So 6 votes, 100%. Can't ask for many more than that. Yeah, also as well, I forget that the chat is 15 seconds behind. So when I say something, it's like, you know what I mean? I always forget that we're not in sync, we're not having a live conversation. But please make sure to check out the AppSec stuff. And I don't have an outro, so we're just gonna go into the abyss of doom of blackness. So I'll see you next time. Thank you for coming and hang out. And goodbye.